All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me for another episode today. I am super excited to have who I'm going to call Coach Steven, as I know him from the podcast I've been listening to. Steven Thomas, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Awesome. Super happy to have you here, sir. So to give a little bit of context to listeners to why I'm bringing you on today is because I have been diving through the carnivore diet rabbit hole for the last several months. And when I get into something, I get stupidly deep into it. I've just been obsessed with it essentially. Because whenever I find something that sounds crazy, that goes against the grain of the main narratives out there, I pretty much automatically get curious about it. I think a lot of us have that in common with how many things we just keep learning turn out to be BS. And so, a little bit of background: my good friend and I, he goes by Peruvian Pull on Twitter. Many people know him from there. We were both traveling in Colombia last year, and we decided to start the trip off with a little experiment. I had been reading about the carnivore diet, how all these crazy weirdos are just eating meat, and it turned out to be really good for their health. And I had already been on the Paul Saladino diet for a while of just meat and fruit, kind of convinced that those two things are great together, meat, fruit, and honey. And so I was like, you know what? Let's just go all the way. Let's try this out. Let's try all meat for 3 months while we're in Colombia. It's already really cheap, and we did it together. And lo and behold, I've never felt healthier in my life. I felt amazing. And so that just sent me into just listening to all sorts of podcasts to start digging deeper in this. And yours is one of those. I originally found you on Dr. Sean Baker's podcast where you did your own story there. So maybe we could start with that. You can just give your background. I know that you have had athletics in your past when you sort of followed along with the guidelines as most people do, and you learned some things in that journey and found that maybe they weren't so true. So why don't you give us a little background there?
Yeah. Well, firstly, apologies for my appearance, but I'm 60 this year, and I went back to playing soccer after a 10-year break. And this is what you look like when you've just started back up and you've just had a shower. But anyway, yeah, with the fruit thing that you just mentioned, I mean, if you'd gone back 500 years and I sent you out to go and get an orange from a fruit tree somewhere wild, you would have come back completely empty-handed wherever you were. So anyway, right, my story. Yes, you're right. I'm just going to save a little bit for you because you're mainly sort of a finance guy. And I can remember there must be something in my mind about thinking beyond, because when I was in my 20s, Richard Branson arrived on the scene with his equity tracker funds, and they were the answer to everything. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, I'm not a billionaire, but he is. So he's obviously making some money out of tracker funds. Why don't I do a little bit of research and realize what's better than that? And I can remember having a small company and setting up a small self-administered pension scheme, which I was told was lunacy. I put £500 a month in at that point for 10 months because I was doing what's called compression funding, left it, and then I cashed it in at 55 and I got over 55 grand from it. And I tell you what, you would get nowhere near that with an equity tracker. But anyway, so yes, I do like to look outside the box. But sadly, when it came to nutrition, the box was so big and so difficult to see through. I absolutely fell hook, line, and sinker for the grains, skim milk, porridge oats, freshly squeezed orange juice, all that. I fell for all that. And I did look okay. And I was, like I say, a semi-pro soccer player. I won a tennis tournament, did a bodybuilding tournament. But I was actually doing the classic outrunning a bad diet. And my chickens came home to roost in my 40s because I was a personal trainer, didn't smoke, didn't drink. So a long, long time of doing all the alleged right things. And I was pre-diabetic, getting fatter, even though I was running 10 miles 3 times a week at a very good pace. An advanced personal trainer, training people that actually got to Olympic level, one particular person competing in the Olympics, throwing javelins. And everything was going south, everything. Lower left quadrant pain, pre-diabetic, cataracts, looked awful, thought I was going to get colon cancer, had a colonoscopy, coronary artery calcium scan of 639, which is pretty high, not the highest. I mean, yeah, Bill Clinton had just over 1,000 when he had his triple bypass. But anyway, so my health went south in my 40s. And it was when I got to my 50th birthday, I didn't go out and buy a sports car. I decided to eat properly and go low carb. And my training was in obesity and diabetes, and it was actually that really before my 50s, where I was putting my hand up in class and saying, well, we seem to medicate ever such a lot in relation to carbohydrates. Why don't we just drop the carbohydrates, which, of course, as you know, is sacrilege. And I was asking the questions from a non-medical perspective, coming in as a newbie and just asking the basic questions that are simple. You know, if something is needing medication, and the more you have it, the more medication you need, I think it takes a complete idiot to not go, well, there's something wrong with this model. I'm sorry, just reduce these things that are making you need medication. To me, that's an absolute no-brainer. So I'm trying to be polite here. So yeah, that was
That's
my
not a
journey. I mean,
requirement. You can let it fly.
well, it's not really something I do, but you can read between the lines what I actually think. So yeah, low carb really helped. Lost a ton of weight. My skin started to improve. My grey hair, which literally, 10 years ago, if I was doing this, I would have had to get a mascara brush and get rid of all the grey from around there. There is a little bit of grey. I'm not going to pretend, but I used to do that. Every single part of this was grey. So I had that sort of reverse aging. My eyesight got better. Maybe one of the things you don't know, Ben, is I am hard of hearing, so I lip read, and that's often why I'm not looking at the camera, as I actually look at the person on the screen, which is something I hate in my YouTube videos, but it's the only way I can hear what people are saying, unless there's captions anyway. But even my hearing got better. So all these things that are supposed to kill you made me better, and all the things that were supposed to make me healthy nearly killed me. It's really that simple. There you go. There's your screen grab or thumbnail or whatever. But that's the truth. The more I didn't listen to the food guidelines, the more I did stuff that's supposed to be bad for me, the healthier I felt. And that's when I got into coaching, because I realized, a bit like you, sort of, this isn't your main hustle, as they say, but it's so interesting, and lives are changing and people are getting fit and healthy. I've got guys coming off of dialysis. I've got people left, right, and centre coming off of diabetic medications. And for those that think, yeah, well, in 10 years' time, is that going to be the truth? Well, yeah, I've got a 40-year carnivore, 30-year carnivore, a few in their 20 years, not age, how long they've been doing it. Plenty in decades, plenty that have done a decade or more. And, I'm 5 years in, and I just keep feeling benefits every single day, something better. I'm going to grab a drink, by the way.
Yeah, no worries. And to your point there, where the more carnivores you look at who are in the multi decades of experience, people like, or decade plus at least, we'll say, like Lisa Weidman, the carnivore doctor, I mean, she looks amazing. She does not look her age at all. She's like over 50s, I think, but she looks so good.
Mm-hmm.
And Kelly Hogan, she's been 10 plus years. Maggie Smith, that woman who's like in her 80s and she looks like she's 50, the
Yeah.
farmer.
Yep.
It's basically impossible to find a long-term carnivore who looks unhealthy. And
Yes.
so this just makes you just start to question, like, man, I mean, I remember, so like everyone else, when I heard about people only eating meat, it just sounded absolutely crazy because I was so ingrained in my brain that you need fruits and vegetables and grains and a balanced diet, and you need the rainbow, and you need like a mix of everything. Um, Yet when I take out everything but the meat, I just feel better. Everything improves, like you said. For me, like so, you said your eyesight, and your hearing, and your hair change, your aging. For me, my asthma disappeared. Like I used to have to, like when I would do a lot of heavy exercise, I would have to either have an inhaler or kind of just take a long break, just get kind of winded. It's like I don't get winded ever anymore. Like I can just go forever. And my energy levels and focus and mental stamina has increased massively. I can just go all day every day. I always wake up energized, and it's crazy. Like I just feel like a whole new level of superhumanness has been unlocked, and it just really makes you wonder, like how could we have gotten this so wrong? How much so many doctors been so wrong that
Money.
we need to have a mixture of poison in our diet. And that is really like the further I go down this is like carbohydrates really are just freaking bad for people. Like, doesn't
Yeah.
matter if they come in grain form or fruit form or vegetable form, and it's just it takes away from your vitality. And what I'd love to do here is because I shared a couple of your videos recently because I just think you do a great job like breaking down exactly why they are not what you think they are. The most recent one was your video on fruit, which I thought was fantastic. But let's do this in order of what I believe to be like the most easy to grasp to the most difficult to grasp. And it wasn't too long ago that I was having a difficulty grasping these things. So the first one I think most people figure out is not great is grains and wheat, like bread. So why don't you fill us in real quick on why that is no good for your health?
Well, it's not designed to be eaten by us. I mean, it has to be heavily refined. That's the first thing. And there's proteins in there that every single gut finds difficult to different levels. So gluten, I don't think that's even controversial. I think there are enough mainstream people now, oh, gluten's a problem. The issue is then you get gluten-free bread and it's full of some other stuff that's rubbish. So it's not really designed to be eaten. Even if you look at bread from 2,000 years ago, it was fermented. It wasn't processed. The bread we eat now is not anything like bread you would see mentioned in the Bible or historical texts. You know, it would have been fermented for at least a week. So even the grain is completely different. I've tried the iron wheat, and which is sort of like the original, and it's horrible. You know, it's not palatable. So I understand why it was refined and things added, because it's not particularly nice unless you have got a week to ferment it and do it in the old traditional way. But even then, you're still making something that's difficult to eat less difficult, and you're not really fixing it. It is cheap. The agricultural era that started 12,800 years ago, approximately. Since then, skulls and skeletons are smaller. We are smaller. Our brain space is smaller. Crowded teeth, which is something I've struggled with, and many people in Britain have bad teeth. But people wearing braces for their teeth are everywhere because our skulls are smaller and the jaws are smaller, so the teeth don't fit. But I mean, that would be an example of mainstream medicine always looking at the problem in the wrong way. Because what is a crowded mouth? Well, it's a mouth that's too small for the teeth. So what do? They try and push the teeth in rather than make the jaw bigger. It's ridiculous. Absolutely everything is upside down. But yeah, grains we're not supposed to eat. They have to be refined. And the wheat berry, I mean, it used to have more goodness to it, but that's all been taken out of it. It's hybrid as well to make it more hardy, more difficult for pests to get to. So in the end, it's a food that we're going to great extremes to make palatable and digestible, and failing miserably by taking out all the things that originally were quite good with it.
Yeah, and to your point there, I mean, when you walk through the store today, so many of the bread has like chemicals and a bunch of garbage in it, and you can see the ingredients. So it's pretty obvious that that's bad for you if you have common sense.
Yeah,
But
I
even if
mean,
you go back,
I'm
go
not
ahead.
anti. See, the thing is, I'm not anti anything. If you like it and you thrive on it, knock yourself out. But then you're probably in your 20s or 30s, or you maybe have eaten really badly and arrived at a sort of whole grain diet when you're 50. You see, this is the thing. It's all a matter of context. If you've eaten pizza, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Cokes, Pepsis and all that sort of stuff, and you suddenly decide that you're going to have granary bread, with a bit of cheese maybe, or if you're a vegan, you're going to have some sort of, vegetable and uh, sweet potato or something, that's going to be better than what you were doing. I'm not. See, this is the thing that people get wrong. I don't think it's carnivores against vegans. I think it should be carnivores and vegans against food processing and what's happening in the world, because at least they're thinking about their health. So I don't want to come across as like I'm anti-bread. I used to make bread when I was high carb, and I enjoyed making it. I enjoyed the process. It was quite good, but it didn't love me. And that's the thing. As soon as I cut out bread, and to be honest, with most people I coach, the ones that are really reticent, I say, here's two things to cut out. bread and potatoes, come back in simply 2 weeks, and you tell me how much weight you've lost, and I will see you in 2 weeks, and you will be telling me if you do it, and that happens 100% of the time. And that's all you need. You need that confidence, which I didn't have when I started, because it was like an N=1, or a few of my clients that were diabetic were telling me about low carb. So that was 10 years ago. Now I've got that under my belt, and literally thousands of people. And in the last 5 years, the majority are carnivore, because that's the majority of what I do talk about. It's easy. It is easy. If you do it, you will get results, and you will see a reduction in meds. Sorry, I've gone off the question of bread. So yeah, or wheat. Yeah, it's a seed of grass, and it's not good for your belly.
Yeah, and just a quick side note, just even when you look into thousands of years, like you were mentioning earlier, this historically has been peasant food. Like that the rulers would give out to the poor to keep them docile and not give them too much energy. And that's like a whole sub rabbit hole in its own, how that was what the poor people ate, while the rich and the kings ate a lot of meat. And that was part of their, we've all heard the term bread and circus. We give them bread and circus and they'll never revolt.
Yeah.
That was intentional. Like, give them distractions and shitty food, and they're not going to revolt because they are like low testosterone, like slop people.
Yes.
And that's always been a part of history. And it's not like just because you look further than 100 years ago, everyone was healthy all the time. Because I think some people kind of get stuck into that like utopianism of just like, oh, people used to be amazingly super healthy everywhere all the time. That wasn't necessarily the case, because like you said, the agricultural revolution started, and that's when humans started for the first time really eating plants heavily. Before
Mm.
that, it was like maybe a berry here and there, but it was like starvation food at best, because people were hunting for food and trying to get meat because it was the most nutrient dense.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
just want to pick up on that, because I'm guessing we're going to get to fruit. Actually, shall I? I'll keep my powder dry, because I'm sure you're going to talk about fruit in a minute. So yeah, carry on.
Yeah, I'm keeping that for last, actually, because for
All
me
right.
that was the most difficult one to get, and I think a bunch of other people will too. And here's why. So for me, the grain part made sense, and that's also the biggest change people tend to see when they cut out grains. They just feel way better immediately, or it seems like that's the biggest killer for a lot of people. For me, the next one down the list is vegetables, and the reason why that was a difficult but not as hard as fruit for me is because it sort of makes sense. I listened to Dr. Anthony Chaffee's videos about plants are trying to kill you, how the vegetables are like, the stalk of the plant and the leaves of the plant and just the parts of the plant that in nature very clearly want to defend themselves against predators and ward off things trying to eat them. And since they cannot run away, they fill themselves with toxic chemicals that poison the fuck out of you. Like they like there's certain plants, if you walk out and eat it, you just die. And
Yes.
it just kills you immediately. And the fact that we have these bags of spinach at the store that are 99% the same thing and think that they're good for us maybe should raise some question marks. But before I go off on that, why don't you explain to people why vegetables maybe not be this amazing thing we've been told since we were born, basically?
Yeah, it depends how you want to look at it. I mean, if I was dropped somewhere anywhere wild, I would know that I could kill an animal and eat it, and it's not going to poison me. But that would not be the case if I went foraging. I would have no idea what was safe, what wasn't safe, and that is vegetables in a nutshell, really. They are there to defend themselves. They can't run away. I mean, all this has been said before. It's pretty obvious as well. So they will have defense chemicals. But now we know the chemicals and what they do, like lectins, for instance, in most of the vegetables. That's just a protein that is quite destructive. And there have been lots and lots of studies, interventional studies. And this is one of the things I don't like epidemiology, because that doesn't show anything. But an interventional study where you put something in, see what happens, take it out, see what happens, do a crossover, and you have one subject going over to the other side of the control and somebody else coming in and trying the same intervention and proving certain things. There's some horrible experiments about lectins and its association with Parkinson's, for instance, where they're able to trace the lectin going from the plant through the vagus nerve and into the brain and causing problems. So It depends how far you and how grisly you want to get. But to me, firstly, names like Deadly Nightshade, that should raise a little flag for you. If you look at, indigenous populations like the Sami, or you're looking at Nenets, and you're looking at people all around the world, if they do eat any veg, which is unusual, by the way, for instance, you'll find that tomatoes will have the skin peeled off. They won't eat the skin of the tomato. They won't eat the seeds. So even these tribes that have not been told, by the food guidelines, people what's good and bad, have sort of known from looking at their past history and experience. So there's nothing that says to me veg are a good idea. There's nothing. So a lot of it is fiber. So we also know that that's contraindicated in the human body. It's indigestible. There's nothing you can do with fiber. The cellulose only feeds the bugs that's in your gut, and that is constantly sold to us as the benefit of fiber. But those bugs can get fed from the blood side from isobutyrate from protein. So there's nothing in fiber, which is a big constituent of why people say plants are good. That's good. It's basically something you eat, goes through this tube that wriggles around, comes out the other end, and it doesn't do anything for you. All right. So why would you eat something that didn't do anything for you? If someone said, "Oh, go and spend £10 at the petrol station, fill up with gas and substance X," and you say, "Well, what does substance X do?" Oh, it goes into the tank, it runs through the engine, doesn't do anything, comes out the exhaust. You'd be like, should I buy this? What? Can you tell me why I buy this? Well, that I've just told you. It makes exhaust really good. And that's the other thing it's sold for. You can poop a lot. I don't want to poop a lot. I want to poop the appropriate amount. I don't want to eat something to make my poop bigger. That's it. And that's all it does, really. It bulks out the matter. And when you have... There are not really very many studies about fiber, but when they are, and they bother to include a non-fiber group, they're always the one that has the resolutions of everything: bleeding, constipation, all that sort of stuff. So,
I'm sure you've seen Dr. Paul Mason's talk
yeah,
at,
Dr.
I
Paul
think it was Low
Mason,
Carb Down Under.
that's quite funny
That's a
because
great one.
he does the graph of the symptoms as they eat less and less fiber, and then he flicks the no fiber group up, and there's no symptoms for anyone. And I think the joke is, I haven't forgot to put the data in. Everyone resolved. So I'm struggling to sort of play devil's advocate, because even when I did eat veg, I can look back and think, well, why did I eat leeks? Well, I ate leeks because they were a really good vehicle for cheese, because I didn't like leeks. I liked cheesy leeks. When I ate Brussels sprouts or Brussels or whatever, or Brussels sprouts or whatever that people want to call them, I covered them in butter and bacon. So they're bitter. And if you want to get into the physiology, why do we have these taste receptors? Well, it's to tell us whether we should be eating these things or not. I mean, that's what my honours degree is the somatosensory part of the brain. So if you put something in your mouth and it's like, oh, no, that's not great, that is a defence mechanism saying you probably shouldn't be eating this. Same with smell or whatever. So I don't like the smell of cabbage, for instance. So should I eat it? No, I don't think I should. So, what's the plus side of plants? No, there isn't any. I can't give any. They look nice on the plate. There you go. Chefs like to put some green on there or some sort of colours. So, yeah, but health-wise, no.
It's visually pleasing, and I'm actually really glad. Before the next point, I just want to mention I'm for sure going to put that Paul Mason talk in the show notes, because it's the best explanation on why fiber is BS and it's a scam. Like people from when they're an infant, they know that, oh, that's weird. If you look at your poop in the toilet, you can see the vegetables in there. That's because it's not your body's not absorbing any nutrients at all. Like you might as well just be eating cardboard, just you go in one side, it goes out the other end. It does nothing for your body at all. It's just taking up space and making you poop more. And poop is your waste product. I mean, that's your body saying, I can't use this.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, actually. Let's get into a couple of other bits then. So where there's reports that eating fibre means some people have lost weight, it's because they haven't got room for proper nutrients. And losing weight that way is not healthy. That's first thing. Secondly, with my specialist practitioner diabetes and obesity hat on, some people say, well, it slows down the blood sugar rises. And I'm saying, well, should you be eating something that's going to give you a blood sugar spike? Should you be artificially trying to lower that or slow it down? Why don't you just eat something that doesn't need some adjunct to make it actually healthy? So all the arguments don't go the extra step. So that they'll say fiber's good for you, go to the toilet a lot. I will say, why is that good? Oh, because it is. And I think it all goes back to a guy's hunch, wasn't it? A book or someone studied some African nation and realized they had big poop and they didn't have colon cancer, and they ate a lot of fiber. And literally, his hunch was, oh, it must be the fiber that's stopping the colon cancer, and you must be healthy if you do lots of pooping. Literally, that's where this all comes from. One person having a hunch and writing a book about it. It's ridiculous.
One of the things that I noticed for sure, like when I guess it wasn't early on, it was kind of part way through, like maybe like a month and a half in, was that I was pooping so much less, as we said. It was like every 2 or 3 days I was pooping, and I started wondering, like, is this okay? Like, is this a bad thing for me? And I just went down to researching more and more, and the more it made sense that, like, man, this just means that, like, I'm eating all these mountains of meat. Just like I would have a huge bowl of ground beef every night, and like steak for breakfast every morning. So I was eating a ton of meat, and my body can break down every single molecule of that meat. It's perfect for your digestion. And so, like, I didn't have any waste. My body was just using all of it. And that's part of the reason why I was feeling so good and so energized and just bouncing out of bed every morning with tons of energy, because your body is actually using all those nutrients, and it goes to making your body work better.
Yes.
And that sort of brings up the idea of bioavailability, which is kind of, what we've been talking about already. But could you explain a little bit about bioavailability and where that comes into this? How your body likes certain forms of nutrients better than others?
Well, let's broaden that a little bit more for you then. So if you go onto Google and you search the top 10 sources of iron, they won't give you the top 10 sources of iron. They'll give you the top 10 plants that have iron. Big difference. And people might say, well, why is that? What do you mean? Well, iron is not easily absorbed by the human body when it's in a plant. But when it's heme iron, when it comes from an animal, it's really easily absorbed. So the top 10 should be based on, if you eat 1 unit, how much can you get out of it? How much can your body use? I'm trying to make this less sciencey. I don't want to get into sort of like too much. So that once you've got that principle, that it's all well and good having 100 of units of something, but if you poop out 100 units, there's no good to that, right? But if you've got something that's got 50 units in and all 50 units go and make something, that is actually more bioavailable. So that's where that phrase comes from. So if you think of a plant, it will be in the ground, and some plants will have their leaves up like this, and some will be flat on the ground. And when they're flat on the ground, they're taking calcium out of the soil. All right. So this is where you get the sort of oxalic acid and other compounds in plants. They're brilliant at binding to minerals. And literally, if you're into gardening, you can go and look at plants, and as their leaves come up away from the ground, it means they've got enough. All right. Well, they've fought hard for that calcium to make that structure. If you put that into your body, those things don't die. Those compounds are still there. So let's say you then have some cheese, or you have some source of calcium to eat, and you've got a compound in your body that wants to go and grab it before your body does. This is where you get problems with plants. So I'm trying to sort of segue from what you just said to what we're going into. It's all unscripted, by the way. I didn't know this was going to happen. So plants will rob you of the compounds that it wants because it's got the compounds in it to latch on. So when you're looking at meat, and again, a very simple thing here, the amino acids in an animal are good at making animals, and the amino acids in plants are good at making plants. So if you eat a piece of meat, you've got amino acids that are good at making animals. So it will help you with all the nutrients you need to become a strong animal. I mean, all of this is very, very simple. So when you're eating meat, how much waste do we have? Well, the proof is, when you nip to the toilet 3 times in a week rather than 3 times in a day. If you're going 3 times in a day, how on earth are you getting to the arrival that is healthy? Because you're flushing all your food away. And if you did a grisly experiment and weighed your food and then weighed your waste, you would think, wow, and I'm going to be really simplistic. Let's say that you had 100 grams of food and you had 100 grams of poop. You would be like, oh, well, it's not exactly as simple as that, but let's use that as an example. Well, you would be thinking, wow, my net balance is nothing. I haven't gained or lost anything. But that's not what happens. I mean, most people will say when they first go vegetarian, they're always pooping, they've got loads of gas and everything's coming out. And when you get to carnivore, it's the complete reverse. And they feel stronger and their muscles fill out and their bones get stronger and they reverse osteoporosis. Well, you haven't got 100 grams of poop. You've got 100 grams of substance, in your body that you needed. And I mean, I've been touched by this personally. My wife had osteoporosis before she met me, and then we went a bit meat heavier once we got to know each other, and that just went, and that is really common. So how did that happen? Well, bone is at least 50% protein. The collagen matrix needs amino acids, so if you give it what it needs, it will build those things and it won't be putting it down the toilet. So bioavailability is just a posh way of saying, is that thing in that food going to be used by my body, or is it in a form that my body can't use and therefore it's just going to excrete? And all these things are really provable. I'm a qualified phlebotomist, but part of that was doing urine clearance tests, so creatinine clearance tests, where people would eat meat and we could look at how much creatinine they were ingesting and then how much they were excreting. We could work out what was going on. And the big one is for those that are interested in thyroid, you can actually get your iodine deficiency or sufficiency tested with the clearance test. So basically, again, just because it's international, I won't use a particular unit, I'll just use an abstract. So 100 units of iodine in a drink, and over 24 hours, how much do you urinate out? Well, if you urinate out 100 units of iodine, you're not deficient. I mean, that's it. That's a clinical test. And that's sort of like a no-brainer, isn't it? So you can do the same calculation mentally in your head. Right, I've eaten all this food and I'm pooping less, but I feel better. I've got bigger muscles, bigger bones. It must be more bioavailable. Or the flip can be, I'm always in the toilet. I'm always pooping. I can't be using the food because it's coming out the other end. So that's
Yeah.
how I would look at it.
And I think that part of the damage that's been done by these crazy health guidelines and the doctors just becoming drug dealers is that people have really just people no longer trust their bodies as the beautiful, amazing machines that they are, to like take in and absorb the things that are good for them and that it needs, and to eject the things out the other end that it doesn't need and doesn't want. And bodies are so good at that. And I think another example that's kind of a tangent, but salt. Like, you can't have too much salt because you just pee it out. You once you have like too much that your body can't use anymore, it just comes out in urine. That same does not happen for sugar. Sugar does not come out the other end because that's bad. It actually damages you. That's a bit of a tangent, though. The one thing I mainly wanted to highlight from that was I pulled up a quote here regarding the muscle you talked about. This is Dr. Stephanie Rimka, who is
Oh yeah.
one of my favorite carnivore doctors out there. She's super underrated. She said, it's very hard for our body to turn plants into muscle. It's very easy for our body to turn muscle into muscle. Crazy, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
this brings back sort of a personal anecdote real quick to throw in. This is another thing I noticed when I was doing that first 3 months of carnivore when I was in Colombia. I was at my hostel one day, just laying back in my hammock on my laptop doing some work, and I just felt my arms like just rub my arm. I'm like, I've been so lazy on this trip. I literally didn't go to the gym at all. I was so busy. I was just grinding like carnivore content and working remotely and being a digital nomad. So like there's no gyms nearby. I didn't exercise at all for a couple of months, which isn't good. That's not recommended, but I was really busy. And I was just thinking, why the hell are my arms getting more muscular? I've just been laying here in this hammock like every day. Like my muscle was growing for no reason. I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. This is completely blowing in the face of everything I've ever heard. Where, I mean, previously I would have to absolutely grind at the gym every day. Well, maybe not every day, but most days, and really like outrun that bad diet I had, which was mixed
Hmm.
with plants, like you said that you did as well. Um, and here I am doing no exercise at all, and I'm just getting free muscle because I'm eating meat every day, and that's it. So blew my
Yeah.
mind. It's crazy.
It is. It is. I mean, that thing about salt, by the way, it's also difficult to overeat it. Going back to taste buds, if you salt your food and you salt it too much, you will literally use the words "it's too salty." So we have that defense. Whereas with sugar, the problem there is you get that dopamine hit, and it's designed to be pleasurable in nature. Um, but I can't talk about that because you want to say fruit to the end. So okay,
Let's
next
do it. It's
question.
time. It's time. And I have the perfect transition too, because something you said earlier was actually exactly what I had in my brain, which kept me from really eliminating fruit. And that's when you were talking about how vegetables don't taste great like innately. We just know that, every kid on earth has been in that situation where they're at the dinner table and they really don't want to eat these vegetables, and their parents say, you got to eat your vegetables even though they taste like crap, you must eat them. So it's like we have that, or the taste buds are powerful at telling us what we should be eating. And so here's what held me back, and maybe you can just debunk this as I'm transporting into my past self here. I was thinking, okay, it makes sense that the vegetables aren't good. They taste bad. Like, no one actually likes vegetables. Stop lying. But fruit tastes delicious. Like, when I fill my plate up with pineapple and mango and watermelon and drizzle honey on top, all of that tastes good to me. So how come my mind or my taste buds are correct with the vegetables but wrong with the fruit? Maybe you can start there. It's your fruit talk.
Yeah, okay. Well, fruit wants to be eaten. That's the first thing. And secondly, nature is amazing and it works out what other animals' weaknesses are. And fruit can't move around, but humans can and monkeys can. And they seem to like a little bit of the sweet taste. Now, that would be all well and good if we went back 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and it was all seasonal and it was all local. It would all make a lot of sense. There's no way on earth, literally, I use that phrase deliberately, that someone would have been eating strawberries 2,000 years ago every single day. That's just not going to happen, right? So that's the first thing. So once you get into the head, all right, okay, well maybe I'll go with that, local and seasonal. Maybe I'll eat local and seasonal. Well, that will immediately mean that for 6 months of the year you won't have any fruit. Secondly, you then got to factor in what humans do. All right. So the fruit we eat now is completely different to the fruit that we used to eat. And there are people who say, yeah, well, animals are different. Yeah, but not as genetically altered as fruit. Fruit is possibly, when we look at the ancient seed banks, about 100 times sweeter than it used to be. And it's certainly more abundant. So you've got two problems there. So humans didn't have this abundance of sugar available, and they certainly didn't have the volume available. But it's meant to be eaten. So all the people that grow in fruit decided to make it sweeter, make it less seedy, less fibrous, more juicy, and all that. So we've now got these artificial fruits that are over the top sweet, and it is a bag of sweetness basically. Now, people often mitigate that and say, well, yeah, although it's fruit, it is healthy because it's natural. Well, it's not natural. Because like I say, 500 years ago, you couldn't have walked out and picked an orange from anywhere because that's like a hybrid. And it's the same with bananas, for instance. They were full of seeds. They weren't like they are now. And
Let
if you look at,
alone before the agricultural revolution. Like, if you
oh
go
yeah,
back 10,000 plus years, like every single one of the fruit that we see in the store today was like a tiny little toxic berry.
oh absolutely, yeah,
These
yeah.
things were
And
inedible.
I'm trying to be less into that and more into sort of like modern day, because even modern day, you can look at the last 100 years. Now, I actually went to the food growers and got all their PDFs and all their growing processes. So you could think, well, look, he's wrong there. That apple is in the supermarket. That's just from up the road. Well, that's really doubtful that it's local. Secondly, if you think that's just been picked, you're probably wrong, because most of the food growers have openly admitted, and I've got the documents on my website, they're going to be about a year in storage. what happens to a fruit when it's a year in storage? Well, any of the so-called nutrients that it's allegedly got go, and they go within 6 days. So they're in this environment, and this is all documented. So that apple that you pick is literally a bag of sugar. That's it. There's nothing in there, and it's a year old, and it will raise your blood sugar. And you've also then got the fructose issue. So if people like fruit, they might want to go, well, I wonder how non-alcoholic fatty liver disease came to be. How come kids are getting it? What is it? And it's sadly the parents believing that fruit is good and giving them too much, or putting it in juicing, which is even worse. Even worse. I'm not saying that actually in the apple shape, an apple is great, but it's certainly better than juicing it. But the best thing is to not have it in the first place, because you will spike your blood glucose, definitely. And fructose, we don't have fructose monitors. We have glucose monitors. All right. So you could have an apple and it could put your glucose up a little bit. We've also got fructose going off to the liver. Now, if you want to make a fat cell, a hepatic cell, a liver cell in a dish, you want to make it grow fat, you only have to add fructose and it will become fat. I mean, that's clinically proven. There are studies that absolutely prove that. The mechanism is understood. I went into the mechanism a couple of days ago and people weren't really listening, because part of the mechanism is there's a waste product, basically ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. All that simply means is adenosine has 3 phosphates on it. And there's a thing called phosphorylation, where they take a phosphate off and then it becomes ADP, and then it becomes AMP, which is a monophosphate. So you've got 3, 2, 1. Well, a side metabolite of that is uric acid. So we know that fructose generates fat in the liver by this metabolism of ATP, breaking it down, taking phosphates off, and ending up with uric acid. And uric acid is the thing that makes the fat forming in the liver. That does not mean uric acid is bad. I'm talking about in the liver with fructose going through this process. It can then generate some triglycerides and fat in the liver. So you've got this thing that generates fatty liver. You've got this thing that puts your blood glucose up. You've got this thing that's got no nutrients in it. And it's got fiber. So it's got 4 rubbish things. There's 4 things in fruit that are not great. So to answer your question, why is it taste good? Is because fruit originally was designed to taste good and tap into nature and make you want to eat it, or make a chimpanzee eat it, or make an animal eat it and poop that seed out later on. So there's your good use for your fiber as well. So it eats that, chomps it down, gets its sugar, gets a little bit of energy so it can walk over there. The fiber makes it poop the seed out, and the fruit is happy and low. You are just a byproduct of this. Sadly, this abundance of sugar is not good because it's addictive. And this is, again, when you've got experiments on rats, this is where this classic, it's 7 times more addictive than cocaine comes from. They looked at functional MRIs, which lit up the brain 7 times illumination compared to cocaine. I don't necessarily mean it is a factor of 7, like you'd kill 7 people to get sugar rather than 1 to get cocaine or whatever. But that got a headline. But the point was that the rats went for the sugar over the cocaine, both addictive substances. But they even went for the sugar if it was accompanied with an electric shock. So it's not exclusively humans that are knuckleheads, It's that addictive, it's that powerful that people will put themselves in danger. And the reason I'm using that is because that's what people do. My stepfather had an amputation due to diabetic complications. Right? Not an idiot. I didn't know what I knew when that happened. That was 30 years ago. I believed high carb. I didn't believe it was diet. I now know it was diet that caused that. And that's a problem. I still get people come to me and say, I'd like to lose a ton of weight, but I'm not going to give up cake. Or I'm not going to give up bread. And when they start having a weight loss stall, or things are not going well, and I say, maybe we could drop the fruit, they don't want to do that. They just don't want to do it. But when they do, they come back 6 months later and say, I can't believe I haven't missed it. And I'm one of those people, because I was a fruit salad sort of guy, I'm trying to think of a fruit I really like. I suppose I convinced myself I like bananas, because in tennis, that was something that you could have in between games. even then, you were told by your coach not to eat a lot of it because it was too sugary. Even then, so you know, when you watch top sportsmen and at the peak of their athletic performance after 5 hours on the court, they're still not chomping down banana after banana because they know it's too glycemic. So there's nothing to say good about it. Sorry, other than if you were out starving and you were transversing some sort of savanna and you found a banana tree and there was nothing else to eat, it would save your life. But not for long. You'd still need amino acids, you still need proteins, you still need fats, you still need water, you still need salts, but it would get you somewhere for a bit longer. But for me, I'm actually trying hard to think of good things to say, but I can't really think of anything.
Yeah, and I think it's just such another amazing example of how plants are so freaking smart, and we don't give them enough credit for how smart they are because, as you were saying, the reason why they make the fruit taste sweet is because they want things to eat it, but they just want that to be the vessel to them moving their seed around and spreading the seed. They're not these, plants aren't these things that want to make everything around them healthy. They're just doing
Yeah,
they're just trying to spread their species. So that's kind of
yeah, and
mind blowing. Like they're using
yeah,
us and we
absolutely.
fell
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the difference between a potato and and an apple. A potato is starch that the potato uses for its energy, and the apple has the sugar which it uses to trick humans. So
And how brilliant of a job that they did. Like it's just crazy to me. And it, it's wild. It's wild.
it is.
Nature is like this rabbit hole has just made me respect nature so much more
Yeah.
because
Oh, yeah.
all of these processes from the vegetables filling themselves with the lectins and the oxalates and all the defense chemicals to stop people from eating it. I mean, that's how they've survived for millions of years of evolution. And then you look at the fruit side, and like we were saying before, like, oh, it tastes good. It must be good for me. But really, that's just a plant saying, ha, gotcha, sucker. I'm just using you to move my seed around. Thank you for eating me. And then we just get left with all these health problems.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
as and we've totally been outsmarted by the plants, and I give them a huge kudos for that. And
And I think
unfortunately, the governments fell straight into this trap, and they found that, I mean, and this is a whole another rabbit hole we can get into, but when I talked with Nina Teicholz about this recently, we went into how the government guidelines have really just said like fruits and vegetables are amazing, and they've just continued to push this up on the food pyramids and the marketing, and since birth we've just seen that we should be eating these plants. They're super good for you. Keep doing it. And oh, whoops! 50 years later, everyone is sick. I wonder why.
yeah, yeah, and it's amazing because if you talk to animal lovers, one way you can get through to them if they're vegans and animal lovers and they love fruit is you do realise that many zoos around the world are putting signs up, please do not feed our animals fruit because they're becoming diabetic. But you don't see a sign like that in the supermarket with humans, do you? So
Exactly.
we'll look after the animals and we'll be absolutely honest and say it's causing problems, but we won't with humans. And that's the thing. I mean, it is over 10 years since I've been doing the diabetic side of things. And like I say, I came from outside the medical profession, so I was very open-minded. When I was high carb, I didn't see anyone getting off their meds. And I would sort of celebrate if someone lost 5 pounds and I would think I was doing a really good job. Well, I look back now and that's rubbish performance. And that's because it's based on rubbish knowledge. And this is one of the things I would say where people are criticizing doctors. I didn't do that deliberately. I was told things that I believed, and I did what I was told to do and what I thought was the right thing because these experts and these textbooks and these tutors told me to do. I now realize in the real world that is rubbish. But that's where I lose my sympathy with doctors is because once you start encountering people that are doing well, and I get this from stories, I've got hundreds of success story videos. People say, I went to my doctor, I'd lost 40 pounds, my blood pressure had dropped, my blood glucose is perfectly managed. I was off all my meds. And then he asked me what I did. How did you do this? And I told him carnivore. And he said, oh, well, that will kill you. And it's just like, no, you've got to start listening. And that's exactly what I did. I just started listening to people and, wow, you look great. What have you been doing? Oh, I've been doing this low carb thing. Right. Oh, tell me about it. It sounds good. So now I can look back over the last, let's say 8 years when I was fully committed to low carb and, like I say, 5 years carnivore, just hundreds of people coming off their diabetic meds, getting weight under control and feeling better, skin better, anxiety less, sleeping better, just everything improving. And like I say, if someone says I've lost 5 pounds, I would say, what, this week or this first 2 weeks, is it? Because most people lose, a ton more weight than that. And firstly, it's sad that people have got to that bad situation. And it's also sad that you have to say to them at some point, you're going to think, can I go back to that way of eating? Well, just remember where it got you. If you really think you need to go back to that way of eating, then you're just going to go back to how you were when you first came in. And most of them actually say, I prefer this way of eating. It's tasty. I feel full. I just love feeling how I feel. I feel like a reversed age. So it's not a hard sell. It's incredible. And I suppose I do
It is
myself
at
out.
first, for some people, but the cravings go away. As I
Yeah.
learned, like the first couple of weeks, like, man, did I want some watermelon. Like, it just sounds so delicious and sweet. And my buddy I was doing it with, he really wanted like a soda, and some nights I wanted some mac and cheese. But after a few weeks, those go away. Like,
Mm,
of course, I remember the taste of it, and it's like, oh, that does taste super good, but I know it's not good for me. It's like,
mm.
it's engineered to be tasting good, and I just think of it as poison now. And I just think it's such a weight lifted off your shoulders once you have that understood better. And to your point of the how we are so careful not to feed animals these things at the zoo, but yet we're feeding ourselves these things is so crazy. And the fact that we have so many doctors coming out to really push against this, like Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Sean Baker, these guys are just awesome legends. They're changing the game. They're going to be in the history books for really pushing such a great movement to make people healthy again holistically. And I love that so much. Um, Stephen, we're getting close to our time here. I know you have a coaching call coming up. So why don't we wrap this up with just your final message to the world? Why should people give carnivore a try for 30 days, 90 days, just to give it a go? What do you think's in it for them?
Well, if you don't try it, you'll never know. And you can tut and shake your head and go, that's mad, that's crazy, and all that sort of stuff. But there's hundreds of thousands of people that have tried it and can't believe it. And I'm one of those. When I did Carnivore, it took me I took on a 30-day challenge to see if I could do it, and here I am 5 years later. So you have got nothing to lose, especially if you're struggling with your weight. The true story is I couldn't shift the weight, even though I was a personal trainer and doing the eating less, move more, and all that stuff. Honestly, didn't smoke, didn't drink. If you looked at my food, you'd think, wow, this guy should be a rail. And I wasn't. I was just getting tubbier and pre-diabetic. And, I wouldn't have believed how easy it is to lose weight unless I tried it. And as soon as I tried low carb, it was literally a head slapping moment. Should have tried this sooner. Should have listened to all those clients. Don't listen to the mainstream media because it's their vested interests. It's that simple. If your advertiser is selling you pharmaceuticals or McDonald's or Pepsi and stuff like that, and you're churning out content, you cannot say these things are bad because they won't advertise for you. It really is that simple. So just look at real people, real stories, try to get to the truth of everything. Just think to yourself, how can this be bad for me? I'm eating salmon, oysters, beef, lamb, eggs, chicken, turkey, all good things. I'm not eating cereals in a box. I'm not eating processed eggs. I'm not eating industrial oils that are called vegetable oils, even though they're not. Just open your mind up to simple whole foods that are up the road. They're not flown halfway around the world. So it's good for the planet. It's good for the environment. It's good for the grass. It's good for everything. It's good for your health. And it's literally a no-brainer. Just at least try it with an open mind. And then if in 30 days you don't feel better, I'd like to meet you because I haven't had that yet. But there you go.
Same for me. I've listened to so many accounts, and I'm glad you brought up the environmental piece. That I'm gonna have to do a whole episode on that in the future because that's a whole different rabbit hole. But Coach Stephen Thomas, I appreciate you so much for coming on, man. I'm going to fill the show notes up with good links here. I know that your video on fruit was amazing. You have a lot of visuals and you really break down the science of it much deeper than we were able to here. I'll also put your website in there, another great resource so people can get in touch with you. Thank you so much for coming today, man.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate you taking the time.
No, it's been a pleasure, Ben, and it's really nice to meet you. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. We'll be in touch.